We're going to reconvene the April 26, 2016 meeting of the Richland 2 Board of Trustees, where we've just returned from executive session to discuss the items that were mentioned in the motion. At this time, we will now have the inspirational moment and the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Plank.
Yes, Mr. Chair, tonight we will be having the inspirational moment given by Dr. David Holzendorf, here, the principal here at North Springs Elementary. David.
All right, good evening, Dr. Ham, school board members, executive staff. Welcome to North Springs. Our inspirational moment for this evening is going to come from a book written by John Gordon called The Positive Dog. John writes these books, and it's basically two dogs having a conversation, so you'll have to listen carefully. The title is Get To Instead of Have To. One of my favorite ways to change the story you tell yourself is to say get to instead of have to, said Bubba. Well, how does it work? Asked Matt. It's a word swap, answered Bubba. For example, humans say the words have to all the time. If you hear them talk, they say, I have to take the dog for a walk. I have to go to work. I have to pick the kids up. Knowing what I know now after reading Jade's book, I would tell them, you don't have to do anything. You get to take me for a walk. You get to rub my belly since I give you so much love while you do it. You get to go to a job while so many are unemployed. You get to pick your children up in car rider line because you should be thankful that you have children. Wow, changing two words really makes a difference, said Matt. Yep, changing two words can change your mindset and approach. When you change have to get to, you change a complaining voice to an appreciative heart. Sure. It's about gratitude, isn't it? Asked Matt. A lot of feeding the positive dog is about gratitude, answered Bubba. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, now we get to say the pledge.
Yes.
We will all envision a flag. Thank you, Libby. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was perfect. Thank you, Libby, for getting the flag for us. Yeah. And next on our agenda, we'll have the approval of the agenda. If I can have a motion.
So moved.
All right. We'll take a motion made by Mr. Plank, seconded by Ms. Mackey. And with no further discussion, we'll have the vote at this time.
Vote. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Motion passes 7-0. Now we'll have our student focus. Dr. Ham.
Yes, I'm calling Dr. Holzendorf to introduce the student folks for this evening.
All right, our student focus this evening is our Dare to Dream dance team. It's our first year having the Dare to Dream dance team here at North Springs, and it's a group of girls that have been performing at different events here at our school, and I present to you Dare to Dream dance team.
Somebody, right?
All right, well, we reached the peak of the evening. It's only downhill from there. So thank you very much for that dancing fancier moves than I will ever hope to achieve. So next on our agenda is approval of the consent agenda. If I can have a motion.
Move approval.
Move approval by Ms. Brill. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Caution Parker. Is there any discussion at this time? With no discussion, we'll have the vote. And the motion passes 7-0. At this time, we'll have public participation. I have no one who signed up, but if anyone would like to come forward at this time, please do so. And with no one coming forward, we'll move on to executive session voting items. If I can have a motion on student appeals.
Mr. Chair, I move that for student number 1 be referred to Blythewood Academy. Student number 2 referred to the IEP team at Blythewood Academy. For student 3, be referred to Blythewood Academy with appropriate community service. Same thing for student 4. Student 5 be referred to Blythewood Academy. Student 6 be referred to the adult education program. And student 7 be recommended referred to Anna Boyd.
Had a motion by Ms. Mackey. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Plank. And we'll have the vote at this time. And the motion passes 7-0. Thank you again, young ladies, for the amazing dance routine.
Yes, yes.
All right, next and much less exciting, we'll have our old business, no action requested on the general fund budget. Dr. Miley.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the board. I don't take offense at that. I think it's a very prudent decision. I would be ashamed if it hurt if it didn't turn out that way. Tonight we've got your first reading of the FY 16-17 budget. To refresh our memories, we have to submit this budget to the County Council by May the 11th. We have first reading tonight. We have a second reading on your first May meeting, which is now May the 9th. So we have one reading tonight and a second final reading on May the 9th, and then we'll turn our budget into the county on May the 10th or 11th. The document that you have in front of you tonight, there's two documents that I've given you. One is a recommended budget for FY 16-17 from the administration. It includes an increase of approximately $14.5 million, $14.7 million, which is about a 5.9% increase over last year's budget. It would increase, the resulting impact on the millage would be 7.4 mils, which is about a little over 2% increase in our millage rate. We have vetted this budget, I think, more than any other budget that I've been involved with. As I think I've outlined to you, we've started out with about $22 million worth of requests that included more growth positions, additional FTEs, more funds for a variety of projects. And through your encouragement, we have gone through and identified cuts. We identified about $1.1 million last year. We've identified about $1.2 million this year. We went back and looked at since 2011, we've identified $12 million in cuts to the budgets of the district. So this is, I think, an ongoing process that we've continued. It helps us identify things that perhaps have outgrown their usefulness or that we find not as a high a priority as before. So it's not just a one-year thing. We've been doing it for the last 5 years, and I think we'll continue to do it. We can go through the itemized listing if you'd like. It's the list that you've seen before. It's in the priority recommended by the administration. Some of the highlights from the last meeting we had. Let me back up just 1 minute. Like our previous meetings, we have taken the liberty of indicating of several millage rate increases, none mandatory, but they're just suggested that a zero mill increase, which is the green line on page 1, a 4 mill increase, which is the yellowish line on page 2, a 6.0 mill increase, which is the blue line on page 2. I'm guessing an orange line, which indicates the 7.4 mills, and then the 8 mill line is the red line. The 7.4 mill line was, we took the approach of identifying the highest priorities of the district. There, as we've talked about, all the needs of the district could be our priorities. Everything that we've identified in the $22 million requests are important and we think would make the district a better district. But we identified that the ones that we felt like were the most critical needs of the district and added up those. That was about $14.6 million, and said that's what we think is, that's what we recommend to the board, and to do that we would need an increase of 7.4 mills, which is below our cap.
All right, board members, questions?
Quick question.
Ms. Mackey?
One of the things I wanted to piggyback on Mr. Jackson's comment or question from the last board meeting, are we ensuring that where we have changes that affect substantially a school, that we are making sure that we've got the feedback from principals? I mean, across the board unilaterally. Are we making sure that as we make decisions that we think are prudent, that we're getting input from our principals?
Well, I didn't sit
Number
down
one,
for
first
2
question.
days because I went and visited the principals about the SROs, and I couldn't sit down for a couple of days.
Okay.
So you'll see that this budget does not reflect any reduction in SROs.
Okay, that's all. I want to make sure that we're doing that
Absolutely.
from here on out.
We heard
Great.
them loud and clear, and from
Okay.
others. Along those lines, I'm meeting with the Sheriff's Department tomorrow morning. I think Mr. Plank is joining us to discuss our SRO contract. We still think there is some room that we think that should be modified and adjusted somewhat. We're not sure, but we have built the full increase here. If we can make some adjustment with the sheriffs, we'll do that. In addition, we talked to the principals again about the voucher days used for professional development. As you'll see, that is now included in the administration's recommendation to at least put back a half a voucher day in the budget so that the schools would have half a voucher day per principal as opposed to full voucher day.
Okay.
We did that also in addition to encourage the teachers to stay in the classroom. That's the rub about professional development. If you take them out for professional development that's wanted and needed, it takes them out of the classroom. It also could increase travel costs. So that's kind of the rationale why we approached it that way.
I want to just add to that. I hope you don't mind. May I interrupt, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please, go ahead.
I wanted to let you know, too, that we met with our Faculty Advisory Council, so they've had an opportunity to look at this. Our key leaders, which would include not only administration, but some of our non-certified staff participate in that key leaders meeting. And then we have a kitchen cabinet and that basically represents the 9 priority areas that we have in the district, and have reviewed it with them. So we did go back and make sure that all of our key groups were
Okay, that's good to
briefed
know.
on it.
One of the
I want to say
feedbacks
we
from that
did parent
faculty.
advisory as well, as I
In the
think I
faculty
recall that.
advisory, I remember the teachers mentioning how important the additional teaching positions were to a school. And that we included that in the priority in terms of additional teachers for the classroom.
Okay.
Brill?
Second. Can I-
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Mackey, you have one
Yeah,
more. I'm sorry.
One more. I know that one of my focal points has been equity and parity with, particularly facilities, but I know with regard to prioritizing what we need, one of my spotlight areas now is adjusting the athletic coaching supplements to align with neighboring districts, which is here. Did we have a rationale for which we arrived at that figure? I know I've had some
Yes, ma'am.
documentation I haven't shared yet, but was there a rationale for that figure?
Rationale was that the total funding recommendation was about $360,000 for the full implementation of the adjustments for coaching. And like we have done in several areas for the last several years, is that while we want to address that area, we don't feel like we can address it all in one area, like the bus drivers last year. We phased it in over 2 years. Several issues where the RTI specialists we phased in over several years. We are trying to phase that adjustment in the coaching supplements in a phased fashion. That is, we would help address it this year with some funds, perhaps not fully, but then address it another year, and so that we take a little bit off and try to address that. We may not fully address it, but just like the other phase in items on this list,
Okay.
we're doing that with that.
And-
That's
and-
the rationale for a 3-year phase-in.
Okay, to that end, I'd love to ask, if you haven't already done so, that we make sure that we have, the people who are well-versed in that area, to be at the table, like our coaches, some athletic directors, or people who could also provide input in that area in the future, just so they will know kind of where they stand in that area, and may be able to provide useful information as well. Thank you so
All right,
much.
Ms. Brill?
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Brill first, and then
Okay,
Dr.
thank
Carson
you.
Parker, yes.
On our agenda, it says no action requested, and then you're saying this is our first reading tonight?
As being accepted as no action requested is in essence the first reading. Yes, ma'am. You don't.
Oh, but we don't
you're not-
vote.
You don't
We
vote
don't
on
vote.
anything.
Not
There's
No vote
Right.
tonight.
Right.
First reading.
The
And
fact
then
that you're reading it and taking it as no action is the first reading.
Thank you. And then if we get a decrease in our graduation cost, possibly, where would that come out?
Well, we would, we're not sure. We're meeting, in fact, we're meeting tomorrow with the university. If they reduce our costs, we could reflect it in the next reading on May the 9th.
That'd be nice. Yeah.
Same thing with the SROs, but I don't feel it's prudent right now to reduce those at this point.
Oh, no, I know that, but it's possible, and so that would be a good outcome.
Absolutely.
Dr. Carson Parker?
I guess I just want to make a statement, and I know schools and principals all have input regarding the budget and everything like that, but I am very bothered that we would put something in the budget that impacts the school and school principals don't know anything about it. I think that there's something very wrong with that, and I'm not holding anybody responsible, I'm not blaming anybody or anything like that, but I just hope that in the future, anything that's in the budget that's going to impact the school, the principals are aware. I think that's crucial.
I'll take full responsibility for that.
Oh, thank you, Harry.
Mr. Manning, I have a
Yes,
question.
Dr. Hawkins Johnson.
It's not totally relating to the budget we have here, but I just want to have a question answered for me. We approved the R2I2 Convention Center to allow activities. What do we plan to do with those monies when we start receiving those monies?
Right now, we take any rental revenues from any activities when churches rent a school, and we would do those the same way. In fact, we're coming up with a new online system that'll help us do that. About half of the revenues stay at the school right now, and about half the revenues come to the district office, and we actually use those in our budgeting. We count those revenues in our revenue forecast estimate for the budget.
So how do we know what was generated and what you used and where you placed it in the budget? Because I don't see anything
We
that
have not
indicates that.
included, in fact, in this budget, but is that for R2I2 rentals? From R2I2? Okay.
Well, now, let me just go back to what you just said to me. You said that when we generate monies from schools and activities for churches and that we implement that money in these budgets. So where do we see that? Or how would we know how much was generated and where we place
If
the
you will turn to the
funds?
first page of your budget document, not the list, but the budget document. On the last line of the revenues is other revenue. That other revenue includes a lot of different items, but one of those items is income from rental of facilities, all of our facilities. And we increased that line item to $100,000 from this current year. We're estimating $100,000 additional rental revenues district-wide.
But it doesn't show how much came in and where you placed it in the budget.
Well, we have that other revenue, for instance, in the 15-16 budget year,
Right.
we've got $2.5 million
Yes.
in revenue. That's from probably 20 items. It's multiple little items that are too bothersome, they're just too minute to include in this list.
I would like to see that. If you can get us a copy of that, how much was generated and where we placed it in the budget, I'll surely appreciate that.
Well, we're placing it right there in other revenues. That's where we're
I think the
including
question
that
is,
revenue.
what are you using it for? Does it
Yes.
go towards general fund?
It goes to general fund, yes. It's part of the
Right.
260,978.
So essentially, every dollar that we gain there is a dollar less. We have to ask an additional.
Exactly.
revenue.
It goes to the general fund.
So it's not
Just like
putting
our
a-
tax revenues, when we rent out rental facilities, those funds that come back to the DO, we count those into the general fund budget. Does that help?
Yes, it helps a little. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manning.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So, yeah, so last year's budget was 246, total revenue, 246.2. This, your proposal is 260.978, right?
Correct.
If you would, just, I know that at the 0 mil increase, we're looking at essentially just meeting some state mandates and some must-haves. And that increase comes by our projections of assessments, correct? I mean, that essentially.
Correct.
And the base student cost went up a little bit, and
The 0 mil would generate about $12.5 million. About 8 or 9 of that is state mandates. Yes, sir.
And so, as it relates to mills, if we approved a budget based on setting a millage rate, then the amount of budget could actually fluctuate, is that correct?
Well, if it depends on whether the mill rate varies, but if the mill rate is constant, then if you set a mill value, if you say mills, 6 mills, and the mill rate is constant, it wouldn't vary. But based on our history with the county auditor, the mill rate can vary substantially over the course of a year.
And because of that challenge and trying to get this as accurate as possible, given information we're getting from the county, history has shown what as it relates to the value of that
This time last year, from this time of the year last year to the end of the process, the mill value that the auditor had went up by $8,000, which, if you remember right, we started out thinking we needed to have a maximum cap of 10 mills plus 3.5 look back in order to get the $11.3 million. By the time we were at the second reading of county council, the auditor had increased that mill value, and we didn't need the look back. We just needed the 10 mills to generate $11.3 million additional money. By the end of the process, and by the final numbers from the auditor, all we needed was 6 mills to generate $11.3 million. So that is one of the challenges that we face in this budget process when the auditor's numbers change that much from April till July.
And that has been somewhat historic, a trend, historical
Correct.
trend, right? So would it make sense to have us look, rather than talking mills, but talking set dollar amount as it relates to the budget? Because it's a somewhat moving target.
Well, and I agree. In fact, that's one of the rationales that in sitting around and vetting these requests, we stopped looking at the lines of the blue and red and green. It was what is the really critical needs of the district, and are they below 8 mills basically? And if so, then that's what we
What
need.
is that number, right?
That dollar amount, yes, sir.
And Harry, correct me if I'm wrong, but last year we gave a dollar amount and it ended up only being 6 mil.
Correct.
So what was our original ask? You said 10 mil?
It was originally 13.5.
13.5,
then
it came down to 10, and then it ended up at 6.
Correct.
So we came in way under by doing it with a dollar amount.
And I wish, I mean, to me, that is so unfair to y'all, because you're having to pass something with an unknown variable there that's moving around, and you want to do what's right for the district, but at the same time, it's very difficult, and I certainly understand that. That's why.
Well, I think based
That's
off
the-
last year. and
that's the
Craig,
point of my
sorry, but
comments, really.
Based off last year and what Mr. Plank is saying, if we do a dollar amount, I mean, we have determined then as a board that these are the items that are important, and we go forward with that. And, you know, when we did at Mills, sometimes we left money on the table, sometimes we got into trouble depending on debt collection, right? Sometimes debt collection it's been a while, but there were years in the past where debt collection didn't come up to par with, you know, and so there were some shortages, but. I'm sorry, Mr. Plank.
No, I was just wanting to make sure we had that clear.
Yeah. Okay, other questions or comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Malik, thank you so much for working really, really hard, and Shelley and you guys working really, really hard to give us a discussion point. You indicated, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that there was going to be a meeting that you were going to have with the county officials to help try to clear the air and settle the dust a little bit with regards to the rate of a mill. Did that meeting happen, and how did that go, and are you feeling more comfortable as a result of that? Could you just elaborate on that a little bit, please?
We did meet. In fact, Shelley Allen and I went over and met with the new county assessor, Liz McDonald, who took John Cloyd's place. He had been there for about 40 years. We had a good relationship with John also, and we had a very good meeting with Liz, and she gave us a lot of information that we had not been getting before in terms of assessments. And she has, I think, I'm not sure Mr. Cloyd and the auditor had a very good relationship. So I think she has a better relationship, but there's still the fact that the assessor gives the assessments to the auditor, and then the auditor still works on them and comes up with the final number. So even though they have a better working relationship and we feel good, and the numbers we got from the assessor were very positive in terms of new growth in the district, which, you know, we had thought the last, 2 years ago, in which we had a mill value declining due to lack of growth and the reassessment. But we were really encouraged about the new construction in the district, which the assessor monitors. And so we were really positive about that, and we are using some of that to help us estimate what these revenues should be coming out of the county. So we haven't completely resolved the uncertainty related to the auditor's office and the assessor's office, but we think we've made some inroads in closing that gap. And we feel more confident about the numbers.
Okay. Is that reflected in then the weight of the mill that you're projecting it to be in the?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The other question, which base student cost is this? Is this the Senate's recommendation, the House?
2350.
compromise?
2350.
Okay, so this is the Senate's version.
Yes.
And,
The House, that's the same as the House. The Senate and the House had the same base student costs.
okay, and so our level of comfort with the numbers here based upon what's being recommended
Well,
till June.
Historically, if there was extra money, the Senate would generally increase
Right.
the allocation to K through 12. Everything we're hearing from the Senate this time, there is extra money, but so far we have not been, I haven't picked up anything from the Senate that they're going to throw any more money at K through 12. They have talked about that one of the key items in this list is the contribution for state retirement, which we're still kind of on the edge of our seat waiting for that final number, because that's a big number and has a major impact on our budget. But right now, we're just holding our breath that the Senate doesn't take any money. We're really not hopeful anymore. I'm not. I can't speak for everybody, and trying to guess what the state legislature is going to do is difficult. I'm not expecting any new money from the Senate this time.
Last question. I actually kind of, not necessarily to try to ask you to change the budget or to go back and re-explain the question Dr. Elkins Johnson asked, but I actually kind of thought about that when you were talking about that, and given the dynamics of what R2I2 is going to be about in an entrepreneurial sort of way, would not be maybe a bad idea to maybe rethink the percentage that they get to keep next year and build it into the budget as an incentive to rent out that space that's designed to be rented out, so that next year, rather than 60-40 split with the district or 50-50 split or putting it in the general fund, that they would be incentivized as an entrepreneurial part of their curriculum to generate those revenues that then, if they generated $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, would be a wonderful way to build back into their base budget request.
Well, I haven't discussed this with Barron or Kevin,
Neither
or
have
Debbie,
I.
but my recommendation is that we don't split the revenues with R2I2.
Right.
That we rent that facility out, put them all in the general fund for the purpose of the district. Now, I don't know how well that will go over with them, and I'm worried that I just said that out loud. But that's my plan. We have started collecting some comparables around the area. The rental rates are we don't know what they will be right now, but comparable facilities rent for $3,000 and $4,000 a day, $2,000 or $3,000 per half day. Weekend rates even higher. So the potential for revenues are there, and we think they should be coming back to the district. Whereas as a school that has bigger facilities and fields and things like that, cafeterias to keep up and gyms to keep up and things like that, R2I2 wouldn't have that, and so that would be my recommendation. And I think, however, I'm reluctant to put a big number in there this year
Of course. That's what I said
because
next
it's
year.
new. We
Absolutely.
had talked about getting the bugs out, not making a lot of rentals before the first of the year, and so I'm reluctant about putting a big number in there, but I think the capacity to generate revenues at R2I2 is significant and for the benefit of the district.
No, I agree. I purposely would not this year. I totally agree. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would actually like to see maybe some of the monies that we're generating off facilities rental go back to facility issues. We could cut down on some of our maybe 8% debt millage and reuse the money back to the facilities themselves, potentially.
Sure. That's one of those that we'll probably talk to the principals to get their input also.
My office actually does all the rentals for the entire district. So we are actually working with Dr. Miley now on what that rental rate will look like, because the conference center itself can be subdivided into 5 spaces. So we'll assign a price to each individual space or the whole space or combinations of the space. But early on, one of the things we talked about was using that revenue to offset other costs, whether it's utilities costs or personnel costs to run the building. So right now we have 2 events that are technically outside events booked, and that's 2 proms. And they're both in the 22nd of April and 29th of April. That's really all we've booked because our new system won't come online until the 1st of July. So we'll be able to give you a much better, my office through Dr. Miley's office will be able to give you a much better projection of what rentals begin to look like once we get up and running.
I'm fine with the infrastructure kind of bent on that, so I'm good. Ms.
Mr.
Brill.
Chairman, I want to make sure I'm real clear, because I said it sort of tongue-in-cheek, but I really am serious about this. And the infrastructure is okay, but I really want us to look at R2I2 as a real entrepreneurial operation. And I want to make that point again very loud and clear, that if you have an entrepreneurial operation where you're generating revenue, then it should be, in my opinion, put back into the operation of the organization, which incentivizes the organization to work really, really hard, not just for paying light bills and those sorts of things, but I'm talking about, as you said, Jack, positions and salaries and those sorts of things that become real serious and meaningful for that operation of that organization. And so I want to make sure I'm real clear about what I'm asking for in terms of going forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Ms. Brill.
I wanted to ask one question, Jack. When we when we rent some of our schools to different churches, where does that revenue go?
That's in that line that Dr. Miley shows up. We
Other-
actually, the folks that rent facilities send the checks to my office. We deposit them in the general fund account that's controlled by Dr. Miley's office. So we're just a pass-through, but my assistant is doggedly after the folks to pay. If they haven't paid within a week, she starts calling them and emailing them, so it doesn't take very long to get their attention. So we take all the money in and we put it into an account that's established.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Again, so talking about rental rates, but back to Harry, you know, we moved the Colonial Center for graduation to number 72, line 72, which falls outside of even the 8 mil. Yet we have graduations occur. And are you bullish on tomorrow's meeting?
I'm optimistic, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I hope so, because based on the math that I've been given, we've been seeing about a 37% compounded growth in that.
Also, I met with the high school principals and talked about the Colonial Life Arena and the cost, and they are open to looking at alternatives, which would be outside venues. But my concern is even, you know, at the cost we're paying now, we still are dealing with a lot of problems. Traffic right now is really bad. It's going to be a real challenge for parents to get there on time. So even when the traffic, the torn up streets are gone, there's still not going to be any parking at that facility. And we'll have a real hard time paying close to $100,000, and it's not a positive experience because it's so challenging for people to get there. So if we're not able to make headway with getting the price reduced, then we are going to seriously look at other venues, including the baseball stadium. The new baseball stadium, we've already called, and they indicated they were interested, but they asked us to give them a little bit of breathing room because they were having their opening game the week we called. And so we're going to go back to them. It does have a covered seating area. Possibly we could work something to cover the field area where the graduates would be sitting. So still wouldn't be ideal, but it would be probably a more positive experience just because it would not have the problems with the parking. The parking there, I don't see it getting any better because there are instead of building parking lots, they're building other structures.
Well, in addition, we're looking at such a huge cost that we're incurring now using the Colonial Life Center. Is it, if we don't, I guess what I wanted to ask is, are we for certain then making that change? Because otherwise, if we are essentially back to having to use that and we don't get the concession for the increased rate, where does that money come?
Well,
Yeah, that's you.
that's me. Probably if at the end of FY 16-17, and we do not get this in our budget increase, and they don't come off our increase, then I will be telling you next year that I was $25,000 in the red.
Well, we could pull it out of reserve fund for one.
That's what I would do, because I think it's worthwhile to try to take that chance. It's $25,000 out of $250 million, and I think we have an opportunity to try to get that rate, those costs down. I think based on the newspaper article, I think the board has also got to address, even if we don't reduce it, if it's still $75,000, there's a lot of people that think that's a lot of money to spend on graduation. That was evident in that newspaper article. So I think that's an issue that even if they come back and say, oh, we won't raise your rate this year, I think we still have, that's just a lot of money to spend taxpayer dollars on graduation. So.
I agree.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Harry, follow-up question. I had it marked and I forgot to ask. I apologize. On the cumulative categories for the positions requested, could you just, it's not very many, could you walk us through that and explain that, or at least me?
Okay.
Understand what that's saying there?
What line is that?
On the bottom of the page,
Bottom of page 2.
what that says is it's trying to do it by level of mill. So the very first line would be it's a seven FTE reduction. That's in the red on the front page. If we have 0 mills, which generates about $12.5 million, okay, we would have 23 FTEs added, but we're reducing by 7, so that's a net 16 new FTEs if the budget is based on a 0 mill increase.
Okay.
If the budget is based on a 4 mill increase, we're picking up 15 more FTEs between 0 mill line, between the green line and the yellow line. And so if we fund the budget at 4 mills, we would have a total of 31 new FTEs net after we reduce the 7. Does that help?
Yeah, and then someone decided then to go through and say what the positions would be, because it looks like we're saying on the on 4 mill, here's what you're recommending that they be for school level positions and for R2I2, as opposed to 8 mills, you're recommending school level and district level, or over 8 school level and bus drivers. So is that what's also being done there as well?
Those qualifiers are in that, but for instance, in the 0 to 4 mills, we have 13 FTEs for school level positions. Those include 5 special education, 2 RTIs, 2 math and ELA specialists, and 1 for the teaching assistant at R2I2 and 1 for the AV technician. So that's where the 13 FTEs for school level positions and 2 positions for R2I2 operations. It's just in those lines that are covered between 0 mills and 4 mills.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we said that we wanted to authorize 6 mills and 35 positions, we're not wedded to the breakdown that's being identified here, I guess is what I'm asking my question.
Right, the breakdown's within the line items that are above
Correct.
that level.
But if we wanted to approve 35 positions and wanted to include one of the ones that's not being identified or being recommended, we'd have to make a motion to that effect.
Correct. We'd
Or
have
have
to
a discussion.
identify what the switch in position is,
Right.
or how you wanted that.
Right,
done.
just a discussion of that.
That's right.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Harry.
Yeah. Other questions from board members? Well,
Quick
Yes,
one.
go ahead.
Just for Mr. Carter, and I thought about it as you were asking the question. When we have individual facility rentals, those proceeds or the fees rather go through your office to the general fund. Say there's a function at.
I'm sorry, ask me that question again.
Say there's for example, say there's a function at, Westwood. Someone's renting the facilities there. Who's responsible for setup and cleanup? Is it the school? Who's responsible for setup and cleanup? And if so, would it not be an incentive, would it not be prudent for them to be able to keep a portion of that, or how does that
Well,
work? Just curious.
What happens is an organization registers as an organization. Then they request the use of a school.
Right,
And in the request the use of the school, they show what areas of the school they want to use. Then we require that they contract with Service Solutions for setup, tear down, and cleanup. So that's actually a separate piece. So the school, now there are some instances where if they use an auditorium, somebody from the school has to work the AV equipment, and that person is, because they're working outside their normal day, would be paid separately. So the school then gets a piece of the revenue that's left. So,
Okay.
And I misspoke, so they have a custodial's outsourced. The renter pays that fee for the custodian. The
It's a
school
separate
doesn't.
fee.
Okay,
That's not
I want
part
to
of
know
it.
how that
And then
works,
I
okay.
I said about 50%, I'm sorry. It's 40% goes to the school. So if we rent a site for $400, $160 goes to the school. We collect it and we put it in their discretionary account, in their general fund. They just use that like they would for buying books or anything else. The district keeps the other 60%.
Okay, thank you.
And there are functions that are school-level fundraiser operations, that where we handle it a little differently. We do not charge them a fee. We still require a custodial because somebody's got to clean up, and they're typically after hours and on weekends. And so if it's a true fundraiser, we get fundraisers who claim to be nonprofits that want to just write a nice little check to the school that's way less than what the share of the revenue would be if we collected the revenue. So we've been trying to clean that up so the school really gets what they deserve. Not somebody comes and says, I'm gonna have a cheerleader camp, I'm gonna give you a check for $200, I'm gonna use your building for 3 days.
Yeah, that's what I want to ensure, that the school is not being tasked
No.
and unduly burdened and not being compensated any of
And
those
if the
proceeds.
principal says no, it ends right there.
Okay,
Then the
thanks.
next level it comes to is it comes to me to look at, make sure we got all the support structure in place. And if there's no request to waive fees, it goes to Dr. Miley, and then it just goes through the system. If there's a request to waive the fee, there's only 2 people that can waive the fee, Dr. Miley and the board.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The principal can't, I can't, nobody can.
I think, and I heard Mr. Jackson earlier, but I think one of my issues is, so if you're schools in certain areas, you're probably gonna have more, maybe your facilities are set up a certain way, you may get more opportunities to rent your facilities. Thereby, that school is gonna have more discretionary funds than maybe a school who doesn't have those same facilities or opportunities. Yet, and also with R2I2, there's the school portion of that, which is involved in some programmatic, right, rentals where maybe they're doing food services or other components, but then there's rentals where it has nothing to do with the students, it's just pure facility rental for the sake of the fact that we have the space. So then I get into, so does Mr. Albersi at some point get a position funded through just sheer rentals of that facility? And then what happens if we fall short one year? Then that comes back on us to figure out how to fund that position. So what I would like to do is really look at more of a, so that all of us can kind of be on the same page. I don't know that it needs to be like a policy, but maybe to Dr. Elkins Johnson's comment, a little more, of what goes into this process and what we should expect comes out on the other end, so that we're all on the same page with that. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. I think, especially since Jack took over the rental process, it's gotten a lot tighter and a lot better. One of the things that we've had is a school will have an event, they'll take a check on the side, they won't tell anybody about it, and then they come to school on Monday and their place is a mess because nobody told custodial. We didn't have any custodial contracts, and so we have to, now their school's a mess, but if they had just run it through the system, we would have made sure that everything was cleaned up as it's supposed to be. So I think we're moving in that direction, and I think we can continue to move that way with R2I2.
Okay, and maybe even unintended consequences, that there's a program that's always been held at Spring Valley, but now it's gonna be at R2I2 because that's a better facility. So those may be some dollars they've traditionally every year just always gotten that now may, move over, so,
Big requester for gyms and fields.
yeah.
Churches, they're pretty much standard, and we have churches all in every, not in every school, but every kind of school, elementary, middle, and high school have churches. We haven't updated our policy in 19 years. We're actually working on doing that now. We should charge people for use. We're not charging them enough. When we look at our neighboring districts, we're way behind. So we're losing revenue opportunities, and there is nothing in the current policy that addresses R2I2, so that's got to be added as well.
Okay.
And are we going to have school input with those proposed changes? Will the schools be able to, or some representatives at the school level be able to provide some feedback with regard to those changes if we implement
Guarantee
any?
you.
We definitely want to have their.
Guarantee you.
Okay, but last question, not to be, I think that you may have touched on this last board meeting, you did. Explain to me the changes that are proposed with regard to the school's discretionary 10% budget. Explain that to me again to be sure that I'm clear on that.
Oh,
We're
there are
talking
two-
about line item 9.
Item 9. There are 2 reasons for that change. One is plain fiscal management and appropriate budgeting. We give the schools a budget, and we've already talked about how to rename this discretionary, because discretionary sounds like, oh, it's just extra fund money. No, it's spent for a lot of things that the schools need. And what we do is we allocate that based on a student population, and in terms of the type of student population, based on free and reduced lunch. The heavier they have more free and reduced lunch kids, the more funds they get, and the number of kids they have, the more funds they get. So that's allocated to the schools. We allocate that on an annual basis. July 1, we'll say, all right, here's your allocation for FY16-17, $72,000. And what we have done in the past is at the end of year, June 30th, 2017, if they had any, that we would allow them to keep anything under 10%. So if they were allocated $72,000, at the end of the year, if they had more than $7,200, we'd let them keep $7,200 of it, and we'd take back the rest to put back in the general fund. We did that on a rolling basis. To me, that's, and they continually have excess funds at the end of the year. So to me, that's just bad budgeting. Tell them they have $72,000, let them spend the $72,000 at the end of the year, fine. Don't let them carry on balances from year to year to year. Just give them a budget, say, here's your budget, that's that. So we're not, and given that they carried them forward every year, they still spent basically the same amount that they were budgeted. They just kept that carry forward going. So that's why we did it, and we're not reducing anyone's allocation. We're not reducing any school's allocation.
Okay. Thank you.
Although I wanted to do that, but I got talked down
I
from that.
imagine so. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
After spending a few minutes here to think about what Mr. Jackson said about R2I2 and the entrepreneurial spirit component of it, I like where that's going, you know, because of the uniqueness of R2I2 and what the design of that build is all about. You know, I like the idea of, I see things such as event planning and hospitality and things of that sort that could integrate, potentially integrate students into that. That's a big area out there. And so I would like to have some of the funds that are generated there considered to put back in. I understand the concern Mr. Chair is talking about as far as we go to an FTE as a result of a good year, and then we run into issues in other years, but that's part of entrepreneurship. And I think that that's some of the things that are worth looking at. So I just want to echo those comments. Thank you.
And I just want to repeat, I'm not against the entrepreneurial spirit where the school is involved and the students are involved in the things that they're doing. I'm not against that. I just want to be careful about how far, you know, make sure that we at least plan it out in a well-structured, agreed-upon manner for everybody. That's all I'm asking for.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
You remember when we went out to Blue Valley, one of the things that they were building out there, and I'm not exactly sure what they described it, but the students were building this mobile station that looked like a platform that they built that you could put out and like a toll booth kind of look. And they were building that, contracting out with the companies that were getting them to construct that as part of that innovative center that we saw, and generating, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars revenue in response to that. And I'd be real curious to find out whether or not they've built that back into the operational budget of that facility. My guess would be they probably have, because they're generating so much revenue. And so I understand your point about having a lean year, but I really think that R2I2 has a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate a model of true entrepreneurship in a way that's not typical of a high school. And so I'm not advocating, I guess I'm asking that we look at it differently than we do the renting of a gym at Richland Northeast and the revenues that come in from that versus how we utilize R2I2 and the unique programs that are designed to help kids become entrepreneurs. So that's all I would say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think we're all on the same page. I mean, in that case, the students develop that. They're bringing in revenue based purely off of their efforts. Yeah, absolutely. That should go back to the place that it came from.
And
If we're renting out a facility for a wedding and the students aren't involved with that, then I question those dollars coming to the educational component when it was purely just a facility rental.
I agree.
Different if they do the food, then they should get some money back off of that. But
I
if
think
they're
developing that'll be one of our challenges this summer, is coming up with that plan and process. Yes, sir. But we have that same idea, and I think Kevin and his group are already thinking that way in terms of entrepreneurial efforts.
Right. Okay. Any other questions on the budget? My last comment, I mean, I'm very much in support of the 14.6 million. That ends up at the 7.4 mil. I think you guys have, as you said, worked harder than I've ever seen you work before to narrow this down. And we've had past years where we've asked to prioritize, and there was never a shift in any of the items above. It just kept coming back to us the same way. This year, every single time, you have continued to narrow it down, to refine it, to bring back what's necessary. You talk about the retirement component. That potentially has implications for both us as a district, but also employees. The rate that
Yes,
they're
sir.
going to have to pay is going to go up significantly. There's a huge unfunded liability, and I think there's more of that to come. And when we look at places where you have pay increases, for some of our folks that are at the lower end of the pay band for us, and they need those dollars to help sustain their families and be competitive for those folks in those positions. And I've made comments about some of these other positions as well, but I fully support the 14.6. So,
But Mr. Chairman, since you put that out there, you opened that door, I would fully support the 4.0 mill, and so I would support the 13.7, and I would fully support that. I look at the difference between where that cutoff is. That's four mills higher than initially we were discussing. We were at 0 when we first started this conversation a few weeks ago, and now we've gone up, and so I would fully support the increase of 4 mills.
well, and you were at 0. I was never at 0.
I thought I said I. I'm sorry. I thought I said I. When we started, I was at 0.
Okay.
Let me make sure it's clear. I was at 0.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson,
Thank
for
you,
that
Mr. Chairman.
comment. All right, any further comments?
Is this available online, or is it only for our reference? Is this document available online, or is it only for us?
It is, it was posted on the board docs this afternoon when I sent it to y'all. So
So it's
it is
just for us to
available.
view.
I
Okay.
can send it by the email, well.
You sent it to us in email.
Yes, that's right. So it is.
So we do have it
It is
that
not
way.
posted on the district's website yet, but it is posted in the board docs.
For us, but not for anyone, not for anyone else to see.
It is in the public board docs.
So it has been posted both there and sent to
So
us.
people who want to see it have access to it?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
By going to board docs, okay. Okay.
And I appreciate your comments. It has been a major team effort. Trust me, it has been a major team effort. And for what we need for tonight, when we leave, is for us to come up to a number, for us to come back to you and finalize the budget. And if it's different than the one we've presented tonight, and so we can bring that for you on May the 9th.
Well, I mean, we're obviously not all at the same place. I'm at the 14.6. Mr. Jackson's at 13.7. I mean, I think if we were doing it by mills, and we did 4 mills, and I know that we may get additional revenue as we have in the past, I may support that, but at the dollar amount, I've got to go with what I think the work y'all have done to really refine down to what the needs of the district are, and that's why I'm supporting that amount. So I don't know where other board members.
Mr. Chair, I will come out and say that I would be in support of the 4 mill increase as well.
Oh, I didn't hear what he said.
Other board members?
I didn't hear Mr. Craig.
Couldn't hear it.
He said 4 as well. 4 mil.
I'm at 7.4, if you're polling us.
I'm just trying to get a feel.
Yeah.
The district is trying to get an idea of what they need to come back. We have to vote on this at the next meeting. So try to get some consensus.
I have one more question.
7.4.
Okay, go ahead.
How are we going to fund the opening of elementary 20 if it's not in here?
We will
Because
be
that's
that
going to be in the
ne-
middle of the year, won't it?
That will be, we are funding 2 positions half-time. We're funding the principal and an administrative assistant that will be beginning in January 17 for ES 20. The full budget for ES 20 will not be until this time next year.
Next year.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
see, one thing that everybody has to understand is we're opening a giant new facility, and we're going to need staff positions, and we've got, just it's really quite an amazing project.
With
And
the
so
challenges
it's-
from
It's
the-
going to take money to do that, and I think that's the reason that we can't, be looking at a 0 or, we've got to consider that that is what's happening. It's not that we're no growth. We are growing.
Right.
And so that new facility is the reason that we're looking at these increases.
The state mandates and the R2, I2 opening together are the majority of those
And I don't know
big
how
dollar
many
funds.
years that we weren't opening something. And so that's good
Yeah.
news, bad news.
And again, last year, the state pay raise was half what it is in this budget.
And I agree, and I think there's other things in here. We look at moving some money off 8% to the general fund budget for IT licenses. which we've talked about as a practice that we need to start transitioning those dollars onto the general fund budget. I look at the voucher days for teachers, keeping them in the classroom and recognizing them as professionals in order to maximize those times. The RTI specialists, which I think are critical within our schools. Lead nurse is grossly underpaid compared to other districts in our district, and I mean, I think that's an issue, and she's a valuable asset in the district. Coaching positions, I mean, we have less coaching positions than just about any other district, and we underpay them. So, I mean, we've kind of double, bound ourselves in that area. And, I mean, the IB program at R&E is something that we've all committed to support. And, I mean, those dollars are there. So I think that if we go less than the 7.4, we present a real challenge to the district on some critical needs. And I know that some believe that the district will just find a way to do it. I don't think they can find a way to do that much with the current funding scenario.
Mr. Chairman, this is not a debate between you and me, but let me say, if we decided that it was going to be a 4 mil, it would also mean that there would be some reprioritization in my mind to figure how to cover some of those positions. So to make it an either or, either you do 7 mil or we can't do the RTI position, or it's an either or, you do the 7% or we can't do the lead nurse, I don't necessarily subscribe to that philosophy. I think that you could do a 4 mil and then something would have to swap out for the nurse if the nurse is that important. So that's, I'm not sure that I necessarily respectfully disagree with what you're proposing, but I just think that, and to the point that Ms. Brill made a moment ago, I think if next year you're going to have to come in with an even larger request in order to fund a new elementary school, this probably ought to be the year you'll be more conservative, so that when you come in next year with a much higher figure, you're not given the shock of a gross increase of meal 2 years in a row. That's my take on that.
Well, I look, I mean, again, not a debate between people, just a debate about the budget. But last year we came way under what we had initially expected the mill increase to be. And we went very conservative last year.
No, it wasn't conservative. Last year we were 10% plus a 3% look back. That wasn't conservative at all.
But no, we ended up at a 6%.
But that's not what we made the recommendation for, though. We made a recommendation for 13%. We just lucked out and didn't have to ask for that much.
Right.
But it wasn't because it was bored. It's because of the way the dollars fell out.
Well, I still think when we heard Patrick Kelly come up and talk about leadership opportunities, and we see lead teacher positions that keep some of our best teachers in the classroom. I mean, in a lot of this, when you get between the 4, when you go up before 4, you're looking at pay increase. Secretaries at the low end of our pay band, getting a pay increase to keep them consistent with other secretaries. So is the district going to go in and take that? Our transportation supervisors, I mean, the board has been pushing to increase pay for our bus folks, and the district's done it. Now they may have to take that out in order to fund something else that's critical. I just think it's unfair. I think that these positions above 4, above 7.4 are all critical, and I just don't see how the district, they'll do it if we tell them to do it, but I think it's going to hurt something else that's important to us. And I mean, I've got to stick with the 7.4.
Mr. Chairman, back to what I was saying before about millage and that fluctuating. I mean, do we want to look at a set dollar amount versus a picking a mill that could end up, if we set the dollar amount, that's why last year turned out the way it did. Why it went less, because we picked a set dollar amount, and then the millage value went up, so the millage went down. So I think that's just kind of this. To me, that gets to be this arbitrary kind of number.
Well, and you're right. My real number is 14.6, which is the number. It happens to be at. But I'm saying the reason that it came in at 7.4 was because the district worked on it and said, this is what we need. So in the past, I mean, we've seen the district come in at even numbers. It's a 7 mil, it's an 8 mil, it's a whatever. 7.4 at the 14.6, so I'll change my terminology to say 14.6. In my mind is the number that is critical for us to do in order to sustain the district, and the initiatives, many of which we as a board have asked the district to undertake. Well, I guess we leave you with a split environment to.
Well, what we can do, we can continue to discuss, and on Monday the 9th, whatever we approve, whatever's approved by the board, might not be on hard copy that night, because whatever we bring to you on hard copy will have to be what our best estimate is, or a couple of varieties. So we actually have done that in the past, and so, but we do need to make sure that we understand that on the 9th, you'll need to tell us dollar amount or mills, what number we take to the county, because we'll be doing that the next day.
Well, I would like to go ahead and, let's at least all agree to shift to the dollar amount, okay? And Mr. Jackson, I think you would agree with that, or?
Yes, sir,
no?
by all
Okay.
means.
So let's go ahead and at least get on the same page there, which will help a little bit.
Absolutely.
We'll take the mills off the table. The idea is what's funded in the dollar amount, I think, is where we are at this point.
What is the county asking for, Mr. Miley, this year? Last year, they specifically asked for dollar amount, and we chose to give them both. What
They
did they ask for?
haven't asked, they've asked for a dollar amount, but they didn't
Yes,
ask
sir.
for two budgets this year.
Right.
So,
That would be consistent with what you're asking for, Mr. Chairman.
Right.
Dollar amount.
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
for whatever it's worth, I can tell you now for the 14.6, the 7.4 mills,
Yes. That's what you're supporting?
that's what I'm supporting.
Okay. Well, we still have some folks we haven't heard from that I think are making decisions as they
Okay.
look at this in more detail. So you have a window there to work
Okay.
within, but.
and if anybody has any questions during this period of time, just holler, please. We'll be glad to help if we can. And thank you. Thanks for your consideration.
Yes.
I want to add one more comment, and that is, as you said, Mr. Chairman, as we've worked on this budget, and we've met with different groups, and we've got input, and we've tweaked what the ordering of these are, I absolutely understand you will set a dollar amount, and it may be that, we'll go back and say we want to tweak this one more time, but we have put a tremendous amount of effort into giving you this information in our priority order, keeping in mind the feedback we got from the surveys of all of our staff, keeping in mind what are the most important things for the district to accomplish, keeping in mind our 9 priorities, keeping in mind the mandates. We will certainly do what the board asks us to do, but I wouldn't anticipate that if you reduce the request, there would be much difference in how we would think we needed to spend the money, because we've tweaked this every way we know in terms of prioritizing and thinking about the wise way we can be good stewards of the funding that we get from our community.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda, I told you that was gonna be less fun than the dance routine. Next up, R2I2, Dr. Ham.
Oh, yes, that's Dr. Davis and Mr. Albersi to give you the monthly update on R2I2.
Chairman Manning, members of the board, Dr. Ham. Mr. Alberts and I stand before you tonight because, as Dr. Horsendorf said, if he's still here, we get to deliver the monthly update to you on R2I2. I thought I'd try to provide a little brief comedy there since Harry, the Harris presentation. Tonight, I'm going to be sharing with you some information about our vacancy update, as well as the early college at R2I2. Mr. Albersi will share that information with you, and also the evening programming that we have scheduled to take place at R2I2 next year. The vacancy postings, you've had an opportunity to review this information about the members of our staff that will be joining us next year. We have hired and put forth recommendations for each of the teaching positions at R2I2, and what you see is a list of initial courses followed by a few highlights of each of the teachers' backgrounds. Where the teachers' contracts have been finalized, names are indicated. Otherwise, no identifying information was used. As you see, our global supply chain logistics teacher, the recommendation for this teacher has over 20 years of experience in the U.S. Army in the field of supply chain logistics and IT. Our next energy teacher, the recommended teacher is a National Board Certified teacher and has been the recipient of the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow Award. In our mobile and non-traditional food and service business, Our recommended teacher has worked for Google and taught overseas and holds a master's degree in business education. Our computer-aided design and manufacturing teacher is Nick Jones, and he's studied with Dr. Hyrick, one of South Carolina's leading experts on CAD/CAM. He's also has some extensive private sector experience. And our managerial accounting and finance teacher is Robin Jones and has experience in banking as a branch manager for a local branch whose business has exceeded $30 million in deposits. And our last course that we'll be offering, that we're discussing tonight, is our Apple app development course. And this course will be taught by Kelly Sumter, who's currently a teacher at Spring Valley High School. She's a National Board Certified teacher, as well as been a leader in the district and at her school for the last few years. Now for our early college information.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Ham.
Good evening.
It's my pleasure to speak with you this evening about our early college initiative at R2I2. Earlier in the year, we sent out a survey to rising juniors and seniors across the district with regard to possible courses that will be taught at R2I2 in conjunction with our 6 courses that Dr. Davis just highlighted. They sent back their information with regards to what they might be interested in taking for dual credit at R2I2 with Midlands Tech partnership. And these are the courses that we came up with. The stage we're at right now is that the students are taking the asset and compass test. Many of them have taken that test. Some of them are scheduled to take it, to go ahead and take it in May. We've set up 2 dates for them at the W.R. Rogers Center, and those dates are May 14th and May 21st at 9 a.m. As soon as the testing is completed, we'll get the scores, vet those against Midland Tech's requirements, and then we will put together a roster. Midlands Tech does require that each of these courses have at least 12 students, so we're hopeful that we'll have at least 2 or 3 that we'll make. We're pretty confident we will, but it could be as many as 4. We're also looking at evening programming at R2I2. We're hopeful to offer some evening programming in our first year. Some of the programs we've talked about are ACT, SAT prep courses, American Sign Language certification, Six Sigma Yellow Belt certification, real estate licensure exam and certification. That actually is a GO program in partnership with with Mr. Cunningham at Adult Ed. That just got finalized earlier. We're excited about that. We also have another GO program, which is our construction certification program, which is covers all facets of building and of the building industry. It's an 8-week course, and it's sort of designed for aspiring contractors. We're also looking at something called CCT, which is a cardiac care technician, and that was based on some requests from the health magnet at Ridgeview, saying that there's a great need in the community for that job. And HVAC, we're also looking at that.
In our next update, we'll provide some more information for early college. We're in conversations with Midlands Tech and working on an MOU for developing an early college program with R2I2 as well with the district, and many of the classes will be housed at R2I2. We'll also give you some additional information on our enrollment update as well as our current student programs. And at this time, if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer them for you.
Board members?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Dr. Davis, on the mobile and, help me out, on the mobile and non-traditional food and service program, there's no culinary skills required or involved in that instruction?
There are some culinary skills that will be involved in that, but it's going to be very minimum.
Okay.
The focus will be on the business side of running mobile and non-traditional food service. But as part of that business, students will have opportunities to learn culinary. We're actually going to be working on rotating in guest chefs once a week to help the students with planning the menus and how to prepare the food properly. I believe the students will also get certified in ProStart. Is that correct? Safe Serve, as well as part of that course.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Other questions or comments? Mr. Albersi, you get to keep the money from the evening program. You build it, you should keep it.
I thought he was going to have money from the food truck. That's what I was asking.
I can keep money for that, too. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda, Dr. Ham, new business, no action requested, grant approval process.
Dr. Arlene Bakutis will be making this presentation for us.
Good evening, Chairman Manning,
Good evening.
Richland 2 School Board members, Dr. Ham, executive staff, colleagues, and friends. I am just really very thankful to be able to provide this grant update to you. And as you are aware, grants really has become part of the Richland 2 culture. In looking at the past 5 years, we have received more than $41 million. And in looking at that, Dr. Shealy and I actually met with Dr. Miley and with Ms. Denini, and we decided that we really needed to tighten up the approval process on that. And in your packet, you do have a description of the grants depository clearinghouse. If you look at the description there, it gives the conventions for naming the files. Actually, what we're going to do is to create a Google folder, which will be a school folder for each school in the district, for the grant liaison, and all of the grants will be listed there. So we're really, really pleased to be able to offer that. And thank goodness we had a lot of people who were actually advising us, not only with Dr. Shealy, but we talked with Dr. Ham. We know that she has written several grants, so she is aware of that process. We also talked with our principals. We received input from our elementary principal representatives, Alvira Butler and Dr. Holzendorf, here tonight. And we also talked with Andrew Barbone, the middle school principal, as well as Dr. Sabrina Suber. And they gave us some excellent, excellent information. And in looking at the process, we actually updated the process that had been put in your packet. And so I did give you an updated grant approval process. It is at your seat, and it looks like this. It has been updated since I had submitted that. So really what we've done is we've separated our grants into two categories. If we have a grant up to $2,500, that is merely the grant notification process. And if it is over $2,500, then we do have a pre-approval and an approval process. So what I would like to do is just to very briefly take you through this $2,500. We start with the writer at the school level. The grant liaison works with the grant writer to fill out the pre-approval form. It is sent to the principal. If you notice on the grid up here, the principal is highlighted because it is the principal who will be approving the grants that total up to $2,500. We really want our teachers to be able to write those smaller grants for their own classrooms. Perfect example is the Sparkleberry Country Fair. It's $1,000 a pop. I am telling you, our teachers love those grants. They know exactly what they want for their classroom, and they get their purchases. So we do not want to burden our teachers on those smaller grants. So the only thing that they will do is fill out that pre-approval form, share it with the principal, and the principal will sign off on it. And that is the 0 to 2,500 for the federal funding. Basically, with the pre-approval process for more than $2,500, it is the same at the school level, the same process. However, the pre-approval form from the school will go to a grants approval committee. And Ms. Denini and I will oversee that committee. And we will include administrators, we will include teachers, and when we are looking at those pre-approval forms, if, for an example, in the grant there will be hiring involved, we would talk with Mr. Garrick in his office, and we would bring someone on the committee especially to look at that. If the grant involves special needs, then we would ask Ms. Davis's department, and we would bring those specialists in to make sure that everyone is aware of what is being proposed in the grant. So from the approval on the committee level, then it would go to the assistant superintendents, and they as well would read through the pre-approval form, and a letter then of the outcome would be sent back to the grant liaison. I know that there are many times that we do receive proposals that are not in line with the mission of the district. And so I see that as my opportunity to work with the grant liaisons to make sure and make recommendations for the grant so that it does align with what we're wanting to do here in Richland too. So once it has been approved, then the writer may go ahead and write the proposal. And to be honest with you, for the most part, because I do submit the federal grants, I say that writer, but more than likely I will be the writer of those. But 3 weeks before the actual grant is due, the proposal as well as the budget will be given to the executive staff that would be involved. I can say that Dr. Miley will be doing a lot of reading because his office, of course, will be involved in every grant that we write. And more than likely, Ms. Gregory is smiling because she knows most grants do involve increasing student achievement. Once those edits are made on the hard copy, and I would collect those, then it would go back to the actual writer. All of the edits would be made on the proposal, and then it would be uploaded for submission. And that is definitely a joyous occasion whenever we submit those larger grants. I would like to take this opportunity to really thank you for listening to this process. It is, as I said, in draft form, and we are continuously tweaking it and improving it based on recommendations. We do hope to put it into place beginning July 1, the beginning of the new fiscal year. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or concerns that you might have.
Board members, questions, comments? I just have one question. So one of the things that is the board, and we brought this up before, is sort of what happens when we come off the grant, impact to budget, go forward, notification to the board of what that is. I know I had a grant come to me and I asked, well, you know, what am I signing? What's the impact? So how are we addressing that?
And Chairman Manning, I think that's an excellent question. And actually, Dr. Shealy and I have talked a bit about that. I think because we continue and are very successful in getting grants, what we would like to do is to put information in the board briefs so that everyone would be aware of not only the grants that we are getting, but if there is a major grant that is going to be due on June the 1st, 2016 by midnight, that we do have all of the information that we need. So would that be
the offloading to the general budget? What kind of idea will we have that, so it's a 4-year grant, it's a program, IB is a perfect example. So we support IB, we write a big grant, we get it, but we want to have an idea as a board about what our commitment is then for go forward dollars.
Exactly, and if you'll notice on that pre-approval form, it does have sustainability, because sustainability is very, very important. And I do know, and we knew going into writing the International Baccalaureate grant that it would be expensive, but it was the right thing to do for our students.
And I'm not questioning that grant, I just use that as an example. The board knew there was going to be some dollars going forward, but we've had others that have come off and we had positions or other things, and maybe there was discussion, but you know, it either didn't register with us, or we were unclear as to what the actual impact would be, so.
And I especially think because we will be providing information in the board briefs about the new grants that we are writing, that communication and the continuous communication will definitely help,
Okay.
as well as the executive staff being able to read the proposals and actually viewing the final budget.
Right, okay.
And that is line item by line item.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments from the board? Thank you very much. All right, next on our agenda, and before, I guess, Dr. Ham, before we get to the actual items, there's been a recommendation to move the meeting from May 10th that is originally advertised to May 9th. So I will need a motion to do that, a second, and then we will have to vote for that to happen. So if I can have a motion to move the meeting from the 10th to the 9th.
And before we make that motion, let me just make a comment so my constituents will understand what's going on. Mr. Manning has gotten a new job, so because of that, it's a conflict with the May 10th meeting and he cannot attend. However, he sent us an email stating that he would like to move the meeting to May 9th and ask feedback. Well, as educators, we all know that May 9th is on a Monday. Teachers and educators, we know that on Mondays, we have faculty meetings. I work almost 2 hours away. We have a lot that goes on for Mondays when you work in a school. So Mr. Manning did not take my consideration that, hey, according to board policy, meetings are held the second and fourth Tuesday unless there is an unusual circumstance. So because of that, he does have the support of the board that they're going to move the meeting to May 10th. So it just lets me know the support that I have and who shows favoritism, because instead of sticking to the meeting, they would rather have Mr. Manning here instead of me. And I know that he's the chair, but however, we do have a vice chair, and anytime the chair is not here, the vice chair is supposed to move forward with the meeting, and Mr. Manning can call in, but he demanded that I call in on Monday rather than he call in on Tuesday. So I want to let my constituents know that I will not be here on May 9th because Mr. Manning decided to change the meeting to May 10th to fit his schedule and not with the consensus of the board. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair.
And actually, we went out of order here. We're really supposed to have a motion, a second, and then discussion. If possible, I would like to go ahead and have that happen so that we can stay within the bounds of Robert's rules, please.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we move the meeting of May 10th to May 9th.
On the meeting
Motion's been made by
Motion's been made.
Dr. Caution Parker. Do I have a second?
I second it.
Seconded
We
by
can
Ms.
second,
Brill.
but I still want to say that even when Dr. Miley referenced that the meeting will be held on Monday, May 9th, we've referenced that and it's also already in our agenda. So it was not made a change to until I brought it to their attention that before you can change a meeting date, you have to follow the policy that we put in place, and the policy says that you must vote on it, and we've never voted before, so that's why he's now adding it to the agenda. So I just want everyone to be aware of that.
Dr. Elkins-Johnson, I do appreciate the comments. You are right.
You're quite
We have
welcome.
moved meetings in the past without following the voting.
Absolutely.
Based off of that, I polled the board with an issue, and that's.
Which is not
by the way-
against Robert
by the
Rules
way,
of Order, polling the board before a
My job is
meeting.
my personal issue. As board members, yes, I share that with you. I don't appreciate you taking that to a board
When
level.
you're
Thank you
going to
very
change a
much.
board meeting where I
The-
cannot be there, I'm going to let my constituents know why I can't
Dr.
attend.
Elkins-Johnson, and you did ask if you could dial in. I responded that you
No,
could.
no. You should have dialed in. It's your personal conflict, not mine.
I'm saying you asked about that, and I
The motion has
responded
been
to you.
made. We can go ahead and vote because
we
we know
will-
it's going to be a 6-1, but I just want my
Yes.
constituents to be
So
aware of it.
let's please, this time we'll move to the vote. Okay, hand vote. So hand vote to move the meeting from May 10th to May 9th. Motion passes 6-1. Thank you very much. Dr. Ham, if you can now get to the items for the meeting.
Yes, We will have a faculty focus, and, well, first of all, let me remind everybody that at 5 o'clock on the 9th, we will have a public hearing on the budget. That's important, that public have input on this. And then following that, we'll have our regular board meeting, which will include a faculty focus, special recognitions, approval of the general fund budget for 16-17, and local board-approved courses.
Thank you. Other items, board members, you'd like to see on this or future agendas? Okay, thank you very much. At this time, we will have a motion to, second public hearing. Again, nobody signed up. If anybody would like to participate, please do so at this time. And with no one coming forward, we will have board and superintendent. You know what? It's actually been a long meeting. I'm going to take the prerogative. If we can please have the motion to adjourn at this time.
So moved.
So moved by Ms. Mackey. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Caution Parker.
Mr. Chair, may I, before we go to vote, I would like to exercise just one final comment, if I would, on the budget, please. It's up I guess it's up to you, but we can make it very brief.
I prefer we're at the adjournment time, so
Okay.
I prefer to move on. Thank you. If we can have the vote, please, to adjourn.
It's on the screen.
Did everybody vote? Okay. I'm sorry. All right, motion passes 7-0. Thank you very much.